Hi everyone, my name's Hannah and this is Paul, who's also just been talking with the glasses on as well. We're both from the National Forest Gardening Scheme. It's a CIC which started a couple of years ago. We aim to promote and advance forest gardening, inspire people to plant more forest gardens, forward education, advocate for forest gardening techniques, and also particularly to support the creation of forest gardens in public spaces. National Forest Gardening Scheme is a CIC. We're a members organisation. Anyone is free to join. We've formed through having a Lumio group, and it's been a case of co-creation with numerous, I think more than 80 or 100 people have been contributing to polls, saying what should happen, formulating aims, and yeah, so we continue from here. This is our first seminar series. We thought it would be great to get some of the amazing, really knowledgeable people within the network together to share something with you. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Oh, do feel free to tweet throughout. You can see the Twitter handle down there. This is the welcome. We're doing it now. Here's the agenda. Simon will be doing his presentation in a minute. We're a few minutes late until just after 8. We're then going to have breakout groups. So we're just going to put you into small groups so you can just share a little bit of inspiration from the talk. We'll give you a few questions so that will hopefully stimulate some really good questions that can then go into the Q&A with Simon. As for question and comment protocol, it would be great if people could use the chat function. So during the talk, feel free to put at the bottom of your screen, there's a little icon which looks like a speech bubble. That's the chat. If you get that up, you can put comments in there. I'm going to be watching it all the way through and gathering comments and themes, and then I'll try to pose those first to Simon at the end so that broad themes get covered before we go to some more individual ones. And if there are more questions, we can ask them, you can send them via email. So I'll just introduce Simon. Simon is a great speaker for today. He formerly trained in ornamental horticulture and herbalism and has extensively studied forest gardens. He has his own 11-year-old forest garden and plant nursery in Cornwall, growing and supplying people with many of those tricky to find plants that we'd all love to have in our forest gardens. He runs tours there, including for medicinal herbs, natural healing, and more.
And the idea is we're going to ask you 3 questions, and you use the thumbs up when you feel you can answer it in the positive. So the first question is, can you name more than 5 herbs? So thumbs up if you can name more than 5 herbs. And everybody who can't, turn your video off. Very good. So that's quite a few. And who can name more than 10 herbs, do you think? Joe, you're not included in this poll, by the way. Yeah, that's quite a few. That's about half of you. Great. And who could name about 20? More than 20? More than 20 herbs? Oh, no. Right, so very few of you really could name 20. Hannah, I don't know how many of these screens you can see, but no. Okay, so maybe 1 or 2 of you can name 20.
Yeah, I think it was about 4 in total. I think also counted. Yeah. Say
that again.
I think it was about 4 in total.
4. Okay, that's 4 out of 37, so that's an 8th, isn't it? Or a 9th even.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show. So my name is Simon Miles. I have and run the forest garden at Falmouth in Cornwall, and tonight we're going to emphasise the medicinal side of forest gardening and the medicinal plants and benefits. And my background is immunity horticulture, and that's what I've been trained in when I left school, went to college, and then I studied to be a herbalist. And I've also now into food production via forest gardening. And what I wanted to ask you, the question about how many herbs you may well know or may not know, is because most people wouldn't name more than about 10. But in this book, it tells you there's 1,000. And really the question is, why don't we know anything about these herbs anymore? What's happened that's taken our responsibility away from looking after ourselves? So we'll come back to that in a minute, but I want you to dwell on that question for yourselves. Okay. So a little bit of history. I want you to now think about 8,000 years ago, what your ancestors would have been eating. Okay. What your ancestors would have been eating if they're in this country at the moment. Okay, so we have very few native fruits. We have blackberries, bilberries, and gooseberries, but we didn't have any other native fruits. We didn't have potatoes. We didn't have corn. We didn't have much in the way of cereals. They came from elsewhere. So if you're thinking about what your relatives would be eating, it certainly wasn't a Big Mac. Okay. It probably, if you look out your window, predominant colour of what you'd be looking at would be which colour? Green. So you'd be eating more things which are connected to being green, which was good because there's a lot of chlorophyll in it. But there's less green things in the winter than there are in the summer. So we need to be eating other things in the winter, like root vegetables, etc. Okay, so they would have eaten a less choice than we might like to think we can grow today. But actually, they would have eaten a lot of things that we wouldn't consider growing today. And the reason that they did that is because they were a little bit more connected to the planet. And of course, there was no option to go to a supermarket like we have today. So we've lost a lot of that connection in what we eat, but also what we would take for herbs. Now, some of the things they would be eating would be herbs anyway. Okay, so they would have eaten nettles, for instance, and they would have eaten things like borage. So they've all got their role herbally. So they would be doing something called self-medicating, a little bit like the animals do now. There was a lovely story of a horse that had cancer and its owners didn't want to have it put down. So they put it out into a field, a pasture, which didn't normally get grazed. And the horse decided what it wanted to eat, and it ate a pile of red clover and overcame its own cancer. And it lived on for many years afterwards. Okay. But normally in a field, today, you've got horses. The common thing is usually to spray off anything that's a broadleaf weed and just have grass. But it's those broadleaf weeds like plantain and nettles that the animals need to make up their deficiencies in their diet. So, just to my right are my notes to keep me on track. So, as the years progressed, we found ourselves in a situation where certain groups of people would like to take a little bit of control of the healing of other people. So there was times when usually it was religions, the Church of England, Catholic Church, they've all had monasteries one way or another, and the people around the monasteries like to take control of those plants to help other people, but quite often there was fees to be paid. And if we come up to about 1903, if you went to see your doctor, your GP, then you would have had a choice of going to see your herbalist doctor or your homeopathic doctor. And that time, a group of chemists who were looking for work went to present themselves to a chap called Carnegie, which you may well have heard of in America, and said they felt that they could extract the active ingredients from these herbs that the doctors were using and make some pharmaceutical drugs. Now, a few drugs have been made up to that point, which is what gave them the idea. But the idea of drugs wasn't a common thing at about the turn of the century, so 1903. And Carnegie went with it because he saw it as a way of making money. And when they made the drugs, it's kind of a précis of all that happened, but they were presented to the doctors of the day, who rejected them and said they were quite happy with their herbs and their homeopathy. So at that point, Carnegie built new buildings, trained the new doctors, and that's how we've got the drugs that we've got today. The interesting part about that, and this is not me passing judgment, this is observation, that right to his dying day, if Carnegie was ill, he would go and see his doctor, his homeopathic doctor, because he didn't believe in the pharmaceutical drugs that he created. For him, that was just a money-making exercise. So that's kind of brief history of that. And then we come up to today, and we've got the NHS in working really hard, and we're lucky to have them, but they've got their way of doing things. But that's not the only way of doing things. So what we're looking at with the forest gardening is how we, within the diet that we have, can actually take in some of the things that would do us good. So at different times of the year, other mammals that are walking around this part of the world would be eating different things, walking past different plants, and benefiting from just walking past a plant when it was having pollen come out of it. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a minute. So, I was going to do a little piece about when we've arrived, when we're on our way in the world that we've just let go of because we're all on lockdown. But when we get the opportunity to have a job, and we have the salary, and then we get to work in a box in a building, we'll call it a box, and we get to look at a screen all day. And if we're lucky, there may be some view out of a window, but may not be. And we get to work with people that we might well like, and we also get to work with people we might not well like. But that is our view of the common have a job type success. Now, that's not putting down anybody that's doing that, it's just how it is, my observation of it. Whereas that is our natural state. Our natural state is to be out in the wild, walking around the planet with all the other components. But we have lifted ourselves out of nature, and we've put ourselves in a box. I'm in a box tonight, and most of you will be in a box too. And the culture that we're in is when we get ill now, we go and see a man who works in a box, who will give us a prescription. And we will go and take that to a man who works in the box, and he'll give us a remedy. And there's a very good chance that that remedy came from plants. Some say as many as 50% of pharmaceutical drugs come from plants, some say 80%. And then we'll go home to our box and take that remedy, and then hopefully we'll feel better. And for a lot of people, when they want to engage with nature, they will turn on the box in the corner of the room and watch David Attenborough. Okay. But you have to remember David Attenborough's in his 90s, and the reason he's in his 90s is he's outside in nature, engaging with it, and he's breathing in all the things we need to breathe in. That's one of the reasons he's got the longevity that he's got. Does that make sense? This is yes, this is no. This is I'm not sure if I'm in the right seminar. Okay. Okay. So, I was listening to something on the World Service recently, which I thought I would share with you. There's a state penitentiary called Snake River. I'm not sure if it's in Canada or if it's in North America, but they got some really difficult criminals there. And apart from a few windows which you can see some sky from, you cannot see any landscape. The only living thing you can see is another inmate or a guard. And you're locked up for 23 hours a day. And you've got 1 hour in the gym for the day. And they did an experiment. And they projected video pictures of landscapes and trees onto a wall in the gym for an hour. And they did a survey, and they noticed that nearly 50% of the people that they surveyed who were using the gym said that that made such a tremendous difference to their day because they were seeing real life things as in nature. They couldn't touch them, but the pictures were what they needed. And it helped lots of them keep their sanity. And many of them went over in their mind the pictures when they were going to bed. So they were going to bed thinking about something nice and relaxing. Just being in nature can be relaxing. 2 hours in a forest garden can do you as much good, so somebody else shared with me recently, as 3 hours of meditating. Okay. There was a doctor called Dr. Roger Ulrich, and his speciality, I think, was gallbladders. And he made a note over a 9-year period of there were 2 wards that people were recovering from their operations. And one ward had no view of any trees, and the other ward had a view of 3 trees. And he noted that everybody who was, nearly everybody who was in the ward where the trees were recovered quicker than the people who couldn't see a tree from their ward. So there is something connecting us and part of our healing process, which is very difficult to quantify because we don't know exactly what it is, but we know we're part of the landscape, even though we've removed ourselves from the landscape with the civilized bit of giving ourselves comforts, etc. Okay. So I want you to recall the smell in your mind of damp soil. If you've ever noticed that when soil gets damp, it has a smell because we're smelling bacteria, and that bacteria has a connection with us and our immune system. And actually, it's one of the important things that we need to breathe in every so often. So if we can breathe it in, it has a relation with our gut flora eventually, and our gut flora, we know that is where our immune system comes from. So for instance, on another angle, we can boost our immune system in the respect that we know the greater the variety of plant flora that we eat and fiber, the greater the gut flora that we have, and therefore the greater the immune system. When they surveyed the Hansa people in Africa, they found out, they noticed they actually pulled their feces apart and had it tested, and the microbes, and they had a huge gut flora compared with the Western world. But their health and their immune system was fantastic. So when their children were born, they would, mum would squat, baby would come out straight onto the earth, and at the same time, mum very often would have a bowel movement. Now, when my own daughter was born, I can remember witnessing the bowel movement and the midwife wiping all that up and away, because that's what they were trained to do. But the only way the baby can get its own gut flora started is to have some of mum's. So the idea is some goes on the skin of the baby, and eventually, one way or the other, it finds its way into the mouth of the baby, and the baby's gut flora starts. And that's the perfectly natural way of doing it. So although we think we're civilized and we're all clean and tidy, being in the maternity clinic when the baby's born, actually, we do need to let some of nature's ways happen for the sake of the baby. That makes sense. Okay. Right. We've also got about, Hannah, how are we doing for time? Can't hear you.
Oh, hello. I would say about 10 more minutes, and then we might end up having shorter breakout sessions or going straight into questions, because we started quite late.
Great, okay. So what I want to talk to you now is a little bit about aerosols. So aerosols, we normally think of aerosols as a can with a top on it, but aerosols really are anything where you've got a mixture of air and particles within it. And in the forest garden here and all around this country, we have a plant called Crataegus monogyna, hawthorn. We've got a Crataegus on the screen you're going to see now. It's an American one. It has a bigger fruit, but it does the same thing. So that's the forest garden, and that's me doing a little whiz round. And we'll get there in a minute. There we are. Nope, back one. That's it. We're on the Crataegus there. So that was an early morning shot with the dew on it. And those fruits are probably about 15 mil across. So it's quite a big fruit. But before the fruits come, there's flower. And with the flower, when the flower pollen leaves the flower to pollinate other flowers on the same bush, what you can breathe in from that, for some people it smells like cat pee, but for other people it smells nice. I like the smell of it. But you're breathing in the chemical Crataegun. Okay, so it's Crataegus is the species, and the chemical within it is Crataegun. Now, if you breathe that in for 20 minutes at a time, you will physically have an effect on your heart. And the way that Crataegun works is, if you've got high or low blood pressure, it will bring it back to normal. Okay. Whatever normal is, it will bring it back to normal. Okay, that's a normal for you, because everyone's slightly different. And if you eat the fruit that you can see, it will do exactly the same thing, because the Crataegun is in the fruit. So you can see now what I mean by self-medicating. So we're eating throughout the seasons, we're eating different things, we're walking through our forest garden or our forest, and we're breathing different things in. And as we're doing it, we're self-medicating. And you can't do that, breathe any of this in, if you're in an office with a screen. Okay? So there is something that's been developed called forest bathing. It started in Japan, but it's even happening over here now, where you can actually go in a forest barefoot, get a feel for it, but also breathe in all the aerosols we associate with it too. Other plants that we can benefit from the aerosols, that I'll name a few. There's a conifer tree called Hemlock, not to be confused with the poisonous plant that we also have. But the conifer is a big conifer, and if you breathe in the aerosols from the pollen on the conifer, you will improve your IQ if you breathe it in for long enough. Okay, so it has an effect on the brain. If you get yourself near a willow when it's flowering and you breathe in the aerosols from the willow, you will improve any element of depression that you may have. So there are chemicals in that which will improve any depression. Okay, so if you make an arbor, like a round arbor if you do that at a willow, that would be the perfect place for anyone with depression to sit in when it's in flower and get a lift. The other one that's quite interesting is yew. So the yew tree, when that's in flower, and I was in a nursery in Devon a month or so ago, and there was a very tall upright yew. It's an Irish form of yew, and I tapped it, and this pollen just ballooned off it, and I could smell it, and I put my nose right in it. And the reason for that is, if you can breathe that in 2 or 3 times a year, there's a biochemist that I read her books occasionally, and I've listened to her seminars. She says that if you can breathe that in, the chances of getting breast cancer, male or female, is virtually nil. Virtually nil. So what I'm saying is, if we're out in the forest garden, we're being medicated whether we want it or not, just by being there and breathing in the flower spores and pollen on the self-medicating front, plus what we can do by eating things. Okay, so some specific herbs that are really useful in the forest garden. Some of you will have nettles in your forest garden, as in the stinging nettles. urtica. And if you can make a tea, it's really simple. You take a mug, you pick the top 4 pairs of leaves from a series of nettles at this time of the year. We don't do this when it's flowering or going to flower, because it puts up a long shoot and the chemical constituents in the plant change. But at this time of year, you pick the top 4 leaves of a series of plants, nettles, put them in the mug, add boiling water, leave it stand for 7 minutes, strain it off, and then drink the liquid. Now you can repeat extra hot water or boiling water on the same leaves again up to 3 times in the day. But what I found with it, it's a really good lifting tonic, because one of the things it does, it's a remineralizer. So in the winter, we eat a less range of food. We're eating less greens, usually, and there's less variety of things. So it's normal roots we're eating, so parsnips, potatoes, and carrots. And they've got certain things in them, but they haven't got the full range that we need. So the nettles will remineralize you. And I always feel if I do this for a week, about this time of year, it's like having a real tonic. Cognitively, brighter, sharper, energetically, brighter, sharper, sleep better, just better all round. So it's worth knowing that one. We've also got Vitex agnus castus in the garden, which produces a berry, a fruit. And this is a really good plant for anything to do with menstrual cycles or menopause. So it's really good for night sweats, reducing night sweats, very good for any mood swings, any irritability, that kind of element of what you might associate with menopausal stuff. I went to a dinner with some friends last year, and the lady put her cardigan on, and after 10 minutes took her cardigan off, and I thought it was some sort of game or a bet she'd had how many times she could do it, and eventually she admitted she was going menopausing and sweating. So she's a nurse, and she did ask me if I had anything, and I did give her some stuff, and within a couple of weeks it leveled it off, and the symptoms just reduced for her, so she didn't go through that. So,
Simon, could you just repeat the name, please?
Vitex agnus castus. Okay, Vitex agnus castus. Okay, right. We're about there now, time-wise.
Yeah, sure. If you have any last comments, that's great.
I've got another 3 pages, but we'll leave that. No, I've got half a page left, but we'll leave it at that, and then we'll do the any questions or whatever format you're going to do that in now, if that's okay.
Okie doke. So I'm going to just get us down to the breakout. Oops. There we are. So we're going to put you in small breakout groups now. You might end up with someone you know, but more likely you'll end up with someone you don't know from a cheese sandwich. But these are the 3 questions we thought might help guide you in one, getting to know each other, but also just, you know, turning over a little bit what you've been hearing from Simon, this very interesting presentation he's been giving, and really try to focus down on what's a practical thing you might like to take away from this seminar. Given there's so many of us, we want to focus it into questions that might be as useful to many of us as possible. So I'm going to now put you into these breakout groups. So just bear with me a second. So if someone could speak, we're not going to obviously be able to have everybody speaking given the time that we have. But if someone would like to start us off, and then we can build, don't repeat, see whether you can build or say something different to what the previous speaker has said. We'll collect a few questions, and then we'll give Simon some space to answer. Is that okay?
Yes.
So who'd like to go first?
Okay, Sherry. Hi
Hiya.
there. So we were wondering, Ben and I, we were talking. So what plants would you get started with in a forest garden? That was our question. What plants would you recommend getting started with?
Is that general or on the medicinal side?
On the medicinal side, yeah.
So,
Simon, just hold on. Don't answer it immediately because we're going to pick up 2 or 3 so that we get a flavour of what people have been talking about. So can someone follow Sherry? So we're making a note of the question, Simon, don't worry.
all right.
Yeah, Simon might. So there's also 2 other ones that were on the chat. One was about whether all hawthorn has the same effect, and the other was about the Vitex agnus castus being potentially bad for men. So those are 2 other questions that could be answered.
So following Sherry?
I have another question as well.
Well, hang on, Sherry, because there's about 50 people here.
Okay.
Jerry's got a finger up.
Can I ask a question,
Asking.
Yeah.
Simon? I just wonder, where do you find that information about what effect the pollens have that you breathe in? Where could I find out more? And thank you for your talk.
Where to find out more about pollen?
I have one more question.
Go on.
So I recently read about cleavers or sticky weed, and I've been having them in with water. I've been drinking the water, and it's delicious. And I just wanted to make sure I'm doing the right thing, because I read about it being good for the lymph, and I just wanted to confirm. Maybe maybe I'm just doing, I don't know.
Sticky weed water, did you say?
Yes, I'm soaking the bur, the sticky weed or cleavers in water and drinking it. It's delicious. Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got a question about sticky weed. Joe was asking about from Sherry. Sherry was also asking about what medicinal plants can I get started with in my forest garden? Where do we find out more about pollen was, I think, Joe's question. And then Hannah, the first one I understood, it's about hawthorn, right? Is it all hawthorns or are there specific hawthorns? And then there was something about, are men particularly affected?
Are any men affected by, so someone in the chat, people in the chat were saying that Vitex agnus castus might be bad for men, maybe even making them impotent, or like having like a anti kind of bad effect.
All right, so Simon is, this is really interesting, right? Simon's computer has crashed, and so he's going to answer the questions. He's going to tell me, and I'm going to tell you, because otherwise it's going to take our deadline.
Let's see, there we are.
This is a wonderful. Oh God, okay. I'm going to stay away. So Simon, the first question was, what medicinal plants can we get started with in a forest garden? So structural plants in first.
Can you hear that?
Okay, and that will include hawthorns. Put a yew in.
I can't hear Simon at all.
So what's happening now is Simon's computer's actually crashed. So Paul is trying to get the answers and then going to relay them back to us.
So,
Okay, thanks.
Simon is saying structural plants in first, like a hawthorn, and a yew. And what was the third one? Or if it's a big garden, a hemlock tree, the conifer. Okay. Okay. In a smaller garden, we can put up this, which I'm going to show you. It's a hibiscus. Okay.
Paul, someone's pointed out as well that Simon could call in to the Zoom from his phone.
What's that one called? Sorry. Yeah. Vitus Agnus Castus. Sounds like a Roman emperor.
Can I ask which hibiscus it is?
Which hibiscus is it, Simon? The Syracuse. The double-flowered Syracuse form. Okay. Very good. Yeah. So when you chew them, they're mucilaginous, so they'll make your saliva go thick. For ulcers or bleeding, intestinal bleeding, that'll be very soothing. Okay. Then there's fennel. Yeah. Just hold a second. Hold on a second. Someone's made the very good point that you could actually call in. If you look at the Zoom invitation, there is a number you can call in just via the phone, Simon. But I'm also conscious that it is the deadline for some people who might have other things to do with their evening. So this is a chance for those of you who want to go to say goodbye. So could I just say, as a closing for those who need to go, Simon, how can they find out more about you? Should we direct them to your website, or is there a book? All right.
We can also follow the questions via email.
Okay, theforestgarden.co.uk. Okay, that's the, I'm just putting it in the chat now.
And it's on the Eventbrite and Facebook pages as well.
And there are courses that he does there too. So for those of you who need to go, we'll follow up with you if that's okay with you. We'll just send it, Hannah will be in touch. But those of you who'd like to stay, would you have another moment, Simon, to answer a couple more questions? You would. Do you want to try and dial in then using the number? Right, because I think I'm going to be annoying people with all the feedback here. So if you could get the link up. No, I tell you what, try and get your Zoom to go up, to get going again, because it was you got a good long session out of it. Okay, so we'll see you in a second. Okay, bye. So wonderful challenges through this medium, aren't there? Thanks for your patience and sticking with it. Simon is going to try and reboot himself and be back online shortly. So we have the other questions. Sherry's other question about sticky weed and putting it in water. Goodness me. Then there's also where to find out more about pollen. and then the other questions about hawthorn and so on. So watch this space. I hope it won't be more than a minute or two before Simon's able to join us again.
Can I ask a general question about I know a few people commented about the clap for carers. It is the only thing that happens here once a week. I did miss it tonight. I went out there briefly, but I don't know if that's something we can work around.
Yeah,
we're going to do, because we've still got at least another 3 lockdown evenings in our series. It would be a shame for us all to miss it. I don't know if anyone else feels like that.
Yeah, lots of positive reaction, isn't there?
Yeah, my daughter came down to say they've started clapping.
Yes. So we may need to shift it, Hannah, from a Thursday. We also wanted to welcome...
I think Thursday's fine, just do it earlier.
Earlier.
Later.
Okay, okay.
If you do it from like 7 to 8, that'd be useful.
Very good. We just wanted to say welcome to those people who aren't in this country and who may not have a clue about what we're talking about when we clap for carers. For those people, it's a tradition, as I think it is in many countries, to clap every week. In this country, it's on a Thursday, and it happened to coincide, so it's pretty bad timing from our perspective. But we're going to change that as per the suggestions just made. Thank you. Simon, please come back.
I could tell you a bit more about what I'm planning next week.
Thank you, Joe.
So I'm really, really passionate about permaculture, as I can see, I recognise a few people here. So permaculture principles are like nuggets of wisdom that are observed in natural systems, and it's how nature, the natural systems are our teacher. And it's really awesome. If you don't know about them, then, or even if you do, it's so good to hear about how you can apply them to designing a forest garden system, and how you can use your forest garden to learn more about solving any human problem effectively. So that's one thing.
On that wonderful point, we'll welcome back. Welcome back, Simon. Thank you, Joe.
Sorry, folks. Too much for my limited broadband width, I think. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Simon. Do you want to go on to the question about pollen, how to find out more about pollen, or where to find out more about pollen?
What was the question about pollen?
Joe?
Oh.
Where can you find out more about what other plants pollens do? Like roses probably do something.
They do a lot of things. There's no definitive work on it. I just managed to get that from a lady's seminar that she talked through, and then I bought her book. There were a few other things, like she mentioned birch and strawberry tree, Arbutus unido. They have both got really good properties for antibacterial. And she said that she fancied it in the future they'd be looked at for antibiotic qualities by the pharmaceutical industry. So there's quite a lot of plants out there. If you can imagine, we're in a world now where things have to be proved scientifically, whereas in the Western world, but there are parts of the world where people just go and do it in their forest or their jungle, because that's what they do. And as a result of that, they've got their ways of doing it, but it doesn't sit comfortably necessarily with scientists here. Okay, but it obviously works for them because, you know, they get results. If they didn't get results, they wouldn't do it, if that makes sense. What I will do is, if I can find the title of a book that might be helpful, I'll let Paul have it. If Paul can let the group know, is there a way of doing that, Paul?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Hannah and I will do that between us.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can give us any other information, Simon, we can circulate it.
Did you want to raise your question now so that others can hear it? There were two, weren't there? Hannah.
Yeah, so there's a few that have come in on the chat. So one is about whether all hawthorns or other hawthorns will have the same effect, Simon?
Okay. So as far as I'm aware, all hawthorns have crataegon. The first name is Crataegus, and that's the crataegon is an extract from the hawthorn as a whole. The main difference between hawthorns is they're either the ultimate size of the plant or the size of the fruit or leaf. Pretty much the leaf quality, the flower quality, it doesn't matter which flower. They've all smelt the ones I've got here. I've got about 4 different Crataegus here. They've all got the smell about them, and they all pretty much taste the same. The fruit, you can make a fruit leather. You can extract the pips through a sieve and then push the pulp through a sieve and then make a fruit leather. I won't go into that now, but it's online how to do that, and that's an easy kind of thing to do with the fruit, and it will last a long time. It's reasonably sweet and children quite like it, so you get yourself through the winter. And our ancestors would have dried things in the past. They wouldn't necessarily have had a dehydrator, but they would have dried certain things to help.
Okay, so Simon, thanks for that. There's two other questions. One is whether the Vitex agnus castus is bad for men. So some people are suggesting it might cause impotence or like be quite bad for men.
Not good for men. No, you're quite right. Yeah. So it's ladies with period stuff, problems. Sorry, period problems or menopause. That's the key use for it.
Okay, and there was another question about sticky weed.
Sherry, do you want to ask your question again?
Oh, okay. I've been drinking sticky weed in I've just been putting lots in a jar and putting water in and drinking the water. It's delicious, and I believe it's good for the lymph. And I just wanted to. Well, I mean I think that the herb cleavers. I think Galen mentioned it. He was. I mean, I know it's been part of medicine for ages, hasn't it? So,
yes. Cleavers is really good for lymph, and they're just coming now. So you can include the new shoots in your salad now. You don't have to make a drink from it. But if you add it to boiling water, was it boiling water you were adding it to?
I'm just having it with cold water, but I'm making sure that they're from areas where like dogs haven't peed on them.
Yeah. If you can have them from a hedge, that's really helpful. You've got to be careful where you're selecting from. Anything that's low down, you've got to be really careful with, because if you get a mouse or a rat that goes over it, they don't have proper bladder function, so they just have a dribble.
Yeah.
And therefore you should not pick anything low down. So anything low down, I kind of, even out of a raised bed, I would always kind of wash it. I mean, some people will say that it will boost your immune system, but you can get something called Weil's disease, which is pretty unpleasant to get. So something off a leaf, I don't normally worry. I just graze my way around the garden sometimes, or a flower, or a nut, or fruit. But low down, do it that way. But cleavers is really good, useful plant. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Simon, could we finish off with a question as to about why you think it's best to situate these medicinal plants not just on their own, grown in clumps of herbs, but actually within a forest garden? What is it about the forest garden context that gives them more potency, if you like?
Okay, so I'm not. I don't think there's any extra potency, but in forest gardening, one of the key things is we have diversity of plants, and if I just grew an orchard with just apples in, we've just got one crop. There's more apples than I need, therefore you're going to sell them or swap them with somebody else. But the idea is that we have a whole range of plants across the spectrum. The more diversity you've got, the less chance you're going to get a build-up of toxicity, and the greater the ecosystem you're going to create. So my neighbour, who's a farmer, he lets his land, and Good Friday last week, the contractor came in, sucked out all the sewage from the farm, spread it on the land. By the end of the day, because we're on lockdown, I couldn't go anywhere. I lost my voice. Then they plough it in and they rotivate it, and after 3 days of working on it, they've sowed some sort of seeding. But there is no wildlife there. There's just nothing. So on my side, I have wrens, green woodpeckers, buzzards, pigeons, crows, ravens, all sorts of diversity. And I want them. I even want the cabbage white to come. I don't mind the cabbage white coming on my kale, because that will come in the summer when the kale's not doing too much. And then when that's inactive in the winter, when the kale's growing away well, because I have a perennial kale, then I harvest, that's my main green. And it's really good. With the kale thing, the perennial kales, you get a cognitive lift, but you also get an energetic lift like you do if you have an Americano. So the kale is a really, really good plant to have in your garden. And it does at its best in the winter, so I never worry about it. But if you've only got annual kale and the cabbage white gets to it, that can be the end of the plant. Yeah. So it's a long answer. I'm not sure if it's a clear answer, but it's the mixture of everything that makes it complete.
Yeah, the diversity, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think probably we need to let people get on with their evening. Hannah, would you like to close us off?
Could I just say one more quick thing?
Yeah.
Last year, when I damaged my back at Easter, I couldn't actually get in the forest garden for 10 weeks to do anything. But when I did get in, the almonds were on the almond tree, the blackcurrants were on the blackcurrant bush, the Asian pears were on the Asian pear tree. But had I been growing annuals, I would have had nothing. You see? So the work is done many years ago. It's each year I get a bigger crop and a bigger crop and a bigger crop. I hand you back. Thank you for listening. You've been a marvellous audience. Be here the same time tomorrow night. You'll have missed the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon.
Thanks everyone else. Thanks everyone for coming, and thanks Simon for Simon for your amazing wisdom, and everyone for persevering through all the technical challenges, which we will try to edit out when we get the video recording. Obviously next week and for the next 7 weeks we have more different webinars on all different topics. You've been hearing a bit about Joe's one next week now. So please do join us again. Hopefully we'll smooth out all the technical things for next time. And also, if you're interested in National Forest Gardening Scheme, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter. You can also sign up to be a member. If you have a look on our website, there's a sign. You can join our Lumio forum and then contribute to what you think we should be doing. So yeah, thanks a lot, and hopefully see some of you next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.